Hi, everybody, and welcome to part two of our, I'm going to say season two of our book discovery group, our book community. A year ago tonight, we as a people experienced a tremendous collective loss. And tonight, there was so much discussion and back and forth and thoughts. Should we be on? Should we be off? There's so many things happening. And then in the end, I decided, you know what? We're going to honor the lives we lost by adding in light tonight as a community in the light of Torah, in the light of mitzvahs, and in the light of our personal connection with Hashem, so that each of us can live more, give more, and bring the light of chesed more into our lives. My husband shared with me something so meaningful. I'm going to share that, and then we'll jump into tonight's topic. Many years ago, there was a Siyum Sefer Torah, a family put together a Siyum Sefer Torah. They were dedicating a Sefer Torah in honor of the family. And there was a lot of preparation for the event and a beautiful celebration. And at one point, during the height of the celebration, a close family member, part of this family that was dedicating the Torah, passed away at the Torah dedication event. And understandably, the family was devastated. Of course, they were devastated about the loss of life of their beloved. It was a mother in the family. Of course, they were, or a sister, a woman in the family. Of course, they were devastated by the loss of her life. That was one part of the tragedy. But another whole part was that it happened during this beautiful event. And they wrote a letter to the Lubavitcher Rebbe asking if perhaps they did something wrong and maybe the Torah should not be used. What could they do? And how should they understand this? And the Rebbe replied that absolutely certain that nothing bad could come out of something good. And the fact that they dedicated the Torah, they didn't do anything wrong. It was a good thing. And he said, for reasons we do not understand, this woman, her life, the years of her life were supposed to be, the years of her life were up to that point. That's exactly the time in which her mission in this world was complete. And Hashem orchestrated things in such a way that she could have passed away in any way. Her neshama could have gone up to Shemayim in any way, shape, or form. And Hashem orchestrated it that her neshama should ascend to Shemayim amidst a beautiful Torah celebration, surrounded by Torahs and surrounded by her whole entire extended family. And the Rebbe was very encouraging that, of course, they should use the Sefer Torah and they should keep growing in good. And to me, this story was so comforting because that was the question that we all had. How could it be that at such a beautiful time and such a beautiful space, 45 people should pass away? And of course, if we don't learn lessons about safety, there's something wrong with us, right? Of course, we have to learn lessons about safety, but that's not what it's about. Because if Hashem wouldn't want them to pass away, nothing could have made them pass away. Obviously, for whatever reason that we don't understand, this was their time. And Hashem orchestrated it that they should be in the holy space of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, in a place of blessing, surrounded by fellow Yidden. And at such a beautiful time, and certainly as they experience the last moments of their lives were spent honoring Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, certainly something good had to come out of that connection with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And surely his brachas are protecting them, and may they also bring comfort to the families of each of these people and to all of us, because we're all shaken and broken still from this event. I'm going to move on to tonight's topic, not because we're finished this discussion, because I feel like this never ends, but let's jump into how we can grow as individuals. And last week we talked about how we experience our lives through the lens of whatever we already believe about ourselves. Whatever we're holding in the cups of our mind and heart, that's what we are going to get wet with. That's what we're going to feel again and again in everything that we encounter. And so we want to believe in our worthiness, in our dignity, in our beauty. And the only unconditional value that we all have, the only true, untouchable, and unbreakable worthiness, dignity, and beauty that we all have is the part of Hashem that we carry within us. So the more real Hashem is to us, the more real our neshama is to us, and the more real our personal value is to us. Or we could say it in other words, that the more we value Hashem, the more we value our neshama, and thus the more we value our own selves. And then the question is, how do we come to value ourselves? How do we come to value Hashem? How do we do that? And we talked about 3 things that each of us can do. Number 1 was to consciously think about Hashem and our neshama. Number 2 was to act on our worthiness and respectability. We also talked about doing a mitzvah and making that connection in our mind while we're doing that mitzvah, to make that connection like I am connected to Hashem. The light of Hashem is flowing through me, within me, and surrounding me, carrying me. We talked about that, to wire our brain to make that connection with and attach it to action. And number 3, we talked about noticing the criticism and negative judgment that our minds tell us constantly about ourselves. Today I asked for feedback, questions and thoughts that came up, and I'd like to respond to a question that came up. And then, because I feel like at this point, what we're going to do here is I'm not at any time clock. We're going to go with what the group brings to the table. And so this is a question that came up, and quite a few people were overwhelmed. Anyone who was new was overwhelmed, and they were like, wait, what? What is the work we are doing here really about? Because it's nice to know about our neshama, but they asked, could you please explain in a little bit more practical ways, how does this actually, having that connection with my neshama, make my life better? What difference does it make to my day? So here's what I want to say about this. First of all, if you read the book, or if you listen to the first part of this series, you can look it up on the website, energizedliving.org, or on our hotline, 718-307-1100. We're also now, Baruch Hashem, on Spotify, if anyone likes to follow on Spotify. And so part 1 will give you a lot of clarity, but here's a summary. Every experience in our lives has an inside story and an outside story. The outside is all of that happens to us. It's the things that other people do. It's other people's behaviors. It's the situations we encounter. It's the facts that are outside of ourselves. When we're in the outside story, right? When we're focusing our attention on the outside story, then if we are upset, then we want to look to the outside to why we're upset, right? In my own life, before I had this awareness of what we're talking about tonight, if I was ever feeling, resentful or unsettled, uneasy, upset, I looked outside of myself. I looked at whatever was going on at the outside part, whatever was going on around me, what other people were doing, the situation, the circumstances. And that became the story. So let's say if someone was talking to me and I became upset during that conversation, I decided that the person I was speaking with made me upset. Of course they made me upset because they were the person I was speaking with when I became upset. I had nowhere else to look. I only knew about the outside of the story. And that's like the example we used last week of Bela, who made a mistake with her makeup, right? Remember, she put makeup, I think, on one eye, and she was feeling embarrassed. So she thought the reason for her embarrassment was her makeup, because she was only looking on the outside of the story. It's also like the example we use with the person holding that cup of coffee and somebody else bumped into her, right? From the outside, it looks like the reason I got wet was because somebody bumped into me. And if we stay only on the outside part of the stories, we end up feeling helpless, stuck, hurt, and resentful. And that's the important part, okay? On the outside of the stories, we don't have control. So of course, if we are focused on the outside part of the stories, we end up feeling like out of control. We feel hurt and disempowered. And here's why, because we can't control it. We can't change it. We can't control who is going to say what to us. We can't control who likes us, who doesn't like us. We can't control so many of the things that happen around us. None of us can control other people's choices. We can influence, but we can't control. So if we write the stories of our experiences based only on what happens on the outside, that story is going to be colored very often by a sense of helplessness, weakness, disempowerment. And of course, then we feel stuck and anxious and resentful. It's like living on the roller coaster. That is, if you don't like the visuals and you want exactly what it looks like, spell it out in practical terms, that's the roller coaster. Someone else is driving, right? It's the outside stuff that's driving. Someone else is in control. My story, my life is going up and down in a way that's completely beyond my control. And even if I don't like it, I'm just the writer. I cannot do anything about it. I feel stuck. And I'm angry at whoever seems to be in charge. But in every situation, there's more than the outside story. There's an entire world beyond the outside. There's the inner world of what's going on in our hearts and in our minds. Inside of our own hearts and minds, our beliefs, our rules, our values, and of course, our emotions that stem from our values and stem from the way we think and how we interpret and how we create meaning of our lives. All of that has a huge impact on everything that we experience. Our inside is very much within our power to change. Our inside is where we could take charge of our stories and we could engage from a place of strength. We are the driver in that space. That's where we're in the driver's seat. That's not the roller coaster, right? That's the driver's seat. When you start, so all of this that we talked about last week, the importance of noticing, slowing down and just noticing what's going on in our mind. And of course, also what's going on in our heart, because they work very much together, right? So when we start noticing the criticism and the negative judgment that our minds tell us about ourselves, something unbelievable happens. It's like we are in that moment, we are pulling aside the curtain and suddenly an entire world opens up for us. And we might not like what we see. We might be we might be upset to notice that, hey, I actually feel insecure. I actually think I'm less than. I actually think I'm not good enough. I'm jealous. I don't like this doesn't make me comfortable. I don't want to notice this. I want to think I'm a good person. I don't want to think I have all these ugly, dark, fierce, fearful and babyish emotions and ideas in my head. But seeing it is where all the change begins. We cannot change if we don't see it. We cannot change at all, right? There's nothing we could do if we don't see it. It's like going to a dentist. If they don't take an x-ray, they cannot fill your cavity. But once we see the inside, once we take that internal x-ray and we see what's going on in our heart and in our mind, we see what we're feeling, we see what we're thinking as we go through our lives, the more we pay attention to the outside, the more stuck we feel. Because the outside is where we are stuck. We can't change it. But the more we pay attention to the inside, that's where we can change. That's where we can set ourselves free. And here's another big idea that I realize we need to address based on feedback. And that is that, of course, we were talking about not living on the outside because that part of it is beyond our control. But I want to add today is that we also don't want to live only on the inside. Of course, we have to have awareness of the inside because that's where we can make changes. That's where all the work is. That's where we can, shift this and ponder that and let go of that idea and embrace a different idea in its stead. That's where all that work happens. But we need to engage with the outside. We need to address problems that come up from a strong place inside of ourselves. But we need to address it, right? So for example, if someone is upset about something that happened or something that didn't happen, we want to look inward. We want to listen to our beliefs, tune into what's coming up for us. Try to see where your own mind is telling you negative stuff about yourself. And of course, call that negativity a lie. We have to have enough clarity. We talked about this last week also, that we need to believe, or maybe it was somewhere else, that I was speaking about this, that just as important as it is to recognize and notice the value and the power of our neshama, it is just as important to notice the presence of our Yetzer Hara, because once we accept the fact that we have a Yetzer Hara, then the lies, then the negativity, the toxicity, the stuff that pulls us down, the way we abuse ourselves in our own minds, we're like, we know it's a Yetzer Hara, right? And we could call it a lie. Hey, I know this is what I was thinking, but it's actually not true. And that's very, very important. We need to, the only way we're going to let go of it, and the only way we're going to know that it's not true, is if we give credence to the Yetzer Hara. Somebody shared with me, I think it was a therapist or psychologist, who said that on their first day at work in some sort of psychiatric emergency ward, a patient came in, and this was their very first day of work. This was their very first patient. And the patient was convinced he is a zombie. And the therapist, the psychologist, was like, what am I going to do with this guy? He thinks he's a zombie. Finally, he got an idea. He's like, I'm going to get a needle and I'm going to prick his finger just a teeny bit. It won't hurt, but just enough that some blood will spring forth. And that will prove to him that he's actually a person, because zombies don't bleed. So he had this little conversation in which he explained what's going to happen, and he pricked the finger, and of course blood came, blood came out immediately. And the guy says, well, I was wrong. I was completely wrong. I always thought zombies don't bleed. But now I see zombies do bleed, right? And of course it's a joke. And the joke is that we believe our lies more than we believe the truth. The blood should have proven to him that he's a living person, because only living people breathe, right? Creatures from outer space or whatever zombies are, monsters, don't bleed. They don't bleed. A person does. But if we believe it, it's very, very hard to let go. And that's why it's so important to know that we have a Yetzer Hara. Just as important it is to know that we have a neshama, to know that we have a Yetzer Hara, an inner force of distraction and delusion that puts lies into our minds, lies about ourselves, to get us down and out of the ballpark, anything to get us away from winning the game. And once we know it, we could be like, oh, that's the signature of the Yetzer Hara, so it's obviously a lie. Okay, that was just a PS, right? But we don't want to live only on the inside. We're going back to that idea of like, we don't want to live on the outside, because that leaves us feeling stuck and helpless and resentful. But we also don't want to live on the inside like, oh, somebody made me upset, I did all my own work, and now I'm fine. No. Once you did all your own work, from that place of now I calm down, I'm out of my amygdala, I'm in a calm and secure place, I'm grounded in my center, my island, and my inner island of compassion, of beauty, of dignity, of strength, my neshama. And then from that place of security and self-respect and worthiness, I'm going to go back and address the outside part of the story. And that means we're not just, perpetuating abuse, chas v'shalom, or dysfunction, we're not ignoring the facts. We're addressing them from a place of from our inner self, in a way that's not reactive. It's not from our trauma. It's not from our amygdala, our fight or flight response. It's secure, it's grounded, it's focused, it's solution oriented, it's connection oriented. So if someone did something that you don't like, you could first ground yourself, do that inner work to get to a calm place, and then we could make a request, or we could try to fix whatever we could fix, or we could say, what am I going to learn from this experience? What's it going to teach me to do differently next time I'm in a similar situation? What am I taking out from this for the next time? Okay. I'm going to open up to questions, comments, discussion. So I see a question here. How can someone get the Zoom information who does not have WhatsApp? Sure. info@energizedliving.org is an email. or you could text to 718-576-0338 and get onto the texting list.
Thank
So what happens if you get into a problem with someone and it takes a while till you get centered again? And in the meantime, what happens to the relationship? That is a fantastic question. Let's say something's going on with your kids, right? So one of your children upset you and you need to respond, but you can't just disappear, right? You can't just you can't walk out of the house because they're little kids, and you can't just, the relationship is ongoing. It's not like you can walk out of the relationship for a couple of days and then come back in, or even for a couple of hours. So I think somebody wants, I think what we need to be able to do is have a set time during the day when we unpack our emotional backpack, where we unpack whatever's going on in our hearts, the stuff that we've collected over the day. And there is a concept of like, when I am now dealing with my children, or when I am now, out with my husband, now is really not the time to spill cold water on this moment. I don't want to ruin the evening for him, or for maybe if you can't do it right now, but like, you could always come back to it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but meaning like you could have a set time. I'm gonna process, tonight when I have a little bit of time, or maybe tomorrow morning I'm gonna take a walk and I'm gonna process what happened, and then I'm going to bring up that, I'm gonna decide how I'm gonna engage, or how I'm gonna bring up this conversation with my child, or with my husband, or with the other person. The relationship is not in a crisis. Nothing urgent happened. And maybe you yelled. Maybe you did respond or react in the moment. And you have to forgive yourself for that. But in the meantime, I don't think of it like, oh my goodness, like the time is clicking and you're in such a big rush. You have time. You could go back to it the next day. You can go back to it in 2 days if you need to. And also, I want to say that, the first time you do this, grounding yourself and calming yourself down, it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of time, and it's a whole big process. But as you get used to it and you're doing this every day and you're proactively unpacking your emotions every single day, all the time, you don't have that much to unpack. You kind of, you don't fall as deeply into the mud, and you're able to get up quicker. You're able to, regulate yourself more quickly because you don't fall as deeply away from yourself. So you're able to get back to that point more quickly. I hope that helps. Right. And she's saying, before you feel secure and able to address the outside problem, in the meantime, the problem could become a huge problem. Yeah, it could. I'm not talking about waiting 3 months. Well, I'm not talking about waiting 3 months. I'm talking about waiting 3 hours, or sometimes 3 days. Well, I want to say something else. If you are dealing with something that is in crisis, this is not a crisis intervention solution. What we're talking about tonight and the whole book is not a method of crisis intervention. It's not. It's a slow process of starting at a place inward and moving your way slowly to better things. It's not going to instantly put out a fire. And I think it's important to notice that sometimes you're dealing with a problem that you do need crisis intervention. But that usually, if you feel like you're needing crisis intervention, over a period, constantly crisis intervention, then something is wrong. And you want to, at the same time that you're doing the crisis intervention, with whoever's helping you with crisis intervention, you also want to do this work of slowly building yourself up from the inside so that things don't become a constant crisis. How do you apply your thoughts to a person absorbing the negative daily news and is getting very upset? What are practical ways to handle the negative news, and how a person responds to the world news? That's an excellent question. Where you're living in this, whoever wrote this, you're obviously in a place where you're keeping your mind free and clean and connected, and you're doing all this work to to not bring in toxic information. You're not plugging into stuff that you don't need to hear about because it doesn't help anybody. And yet somebody in your life is constantly absorbing negative news and getting anxious from it and getting all worked up about it and just constantly on that, like getting, has a steady IV drip of anxiety coming into their body every single day, day after day. How do you deal with it? I don't think we could get other people to change, but by being an example, by being a role model. In other words, I'm assuming this person is a spouse or a very close relative who, if they would want your advice, I'm sure you already told them. You kindly, very subtly or gently suggested, by the way, maybe that the news feed that's coming to your morning every day, maybe that's contributing to the anxiety. Maybe it's not so good for you. I see you're getting so upset. You probably did that already, right? And it probably didn't work because people don't change from being told what to do. So two things. First of all, by example, the person might eventually come to realize it. And second of all, what I always like to, suggest is making a request. It would really mean a lot to me if during the hours of the morning, we don't have the news playing, or, make a request that's about you, not about the other person. It would really mean a lot to me if I could have blah, 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 whatever it is that you want. I think that, goes a long way. And by the way, I'm reading questions from the chat. If anybody wants to speak up live, unmute yourself and just jump in, interrupt me, okay? Or let me know that you want to speak and I will be quiet. What if you had a conversation with someone who has hurt you in order to move forward? Maybe they hurt you in order to move forward, but then you see this person on a weekly basis and they still trigger you every time you see them. Should you stay away for a bit until the negative feelings subside, or do you face them regardless? Wow, this is a very big question. A lot of people that I know are dealing with broken relationships that were very close. Sometimes it's between a parent and a child. Sometimes it's between siblings, sadly, tragically. Also between parent and child, it's very tragic. And sometimes it's between close, people who were close friends, and for whatever reason, the friendship wasn't working for one of the people and they needed to break up. So let's say you're not the person who decided to walk away. The other person decided to walk away and they did it for their own good because they felt that they needed to. And now you're left like, there's so many unprocessed emotions. There's so much hurt. There's so much rejection. There's so much insecurity. There's so much fear and challenging yourself. Can I trust myself again? Can I trust other people again? It's really, 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 really hard. And all that pain is definitely going to be triggered when you see that person. So I personally, depending on this is a very personal question, if you get so unsettled that it ruins your day and you really cannot do the day and you really cannot do it, I would suggest if it's a good idea to try to not to see them for while you're in that much agony. At the same time, the work that you want to do is, we're going to be talking about this next week more, establishing attributing all power to Hashem, also being very compassionate to yourself, like to that little girl inside of you who's very hurt, embracing her, loving her, all the work of healing that you have to do. Focus on your work of healing and eventually it will subside. So you need to decide if that person is triggering you so bad that it just totally unsettles you and you're not yet ready to handle it, then it's a good idea to stay away. But you want to work towards, yes, being able to handle it because you want to build up strength. You want to build up healing. It's a wound that needs to heal. And of course, when it comes to family, certainly when it comes to family and even when it comes to friend, I'm personally a very big believer. I learned this from my father. Like, what? There's always hope in a relationship. There's always, we never want to do something that's going to close the door forever. There is always hope. There's people change, situations change. And we always want to leave the door open to be able to reconnect. At the same time, for right now, if the other person made a decision that's hurting you, you need to kind of accept that this person, okay, I thought I had a sister in this neighborhood, but apparently I don't. I thought I had a friend. I don't. I have to accept this person. My vision of this person is not what the person actually is, right? We have this fantasy, and the reality is not consistent with our fantasy. We have to really let go of the fantasy. We have to mourn it. We have to grieve it, and we have to let go of it and accept the reality that we can't control it, and that this relationship is over for now. Wow. Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. That is so beautiful. Can I just ask you one question about it? Because I know that you've been doing this work for a while. I mean, you've been, not for so long, but you're like amazing. You're like 5 steps ahead. But
thanks.
I just wanted to ask you this. Before you started doing all of this work, can you tell us, because I think this is really, really important. Basically what you're saying is that you messed up a little bit, right? Maybe you didn't like the way you got out the door in the morning. Maybe you left a mess, or maybe you, got annoyed at someone, whatever it was, you didn't like the way you got out the door. Now, you were able to, and you were feeling horrible about it, but you were able to catch yourself and say, hey, I can let go of that. I can have this minute is the first minute of the rest of my day. So that wasn't okay, but the rest of my day could be okay. And tomorrow I'll do my morning. Maybe I'll do my morning differently. Maybe I'll learn something from today. Maybe, I don't know, but it doesn't have to define my whole day. It certainly doesn't have to define me. That's basically what you're saying. But I'm curious, a lot of people feel that, if I'm going to be nice to myself like that, then I'm just never going to change. I want to hear your experience with that, because I think you used to beat yourself up, right? That's exactly what we're talking about. It is exercise, because every time you practice this, but first of all, let's just put it out there, okay? Being mad at yourself and beating yourself up does not produce anything productive. Okay, we cannot whip ourselves into shape. It doesn't work. There's no such thing. It's a myth. It doesn't actually work. Nobody has ever changed because they were sufficiently criticized, beaten, or destroyed, or knocked down. Nobody changes from that. But from compassion, we could decide that, what, we could forgive ourselves for our mistakes, and we could learn from those mistakes, and move, and then give ourselves permission to move forward with our dignity, because we know that mistake or that behavior, or even that horrible feeling, the feeling of like, oh my, I'm such a failure, loser, whatever that commentary is, it doesn't belong to me. It landed on my head because Hashem wants me to come closer to him right now in this minute, but it does not belong to me. And when you decide that, every time you decide that it doesn't belong to me, and you embrace the truth of who you are, of who we are, the dignity, the courage, the beauty of being carriers of Hashem's light, that's where the awesomeness is. That's where the growth is, and that's where real change could begin to happen. Change in the behaviors that we really want to see changing. So thank you so much for sharing that. That was beautiful. I would love to know from anybody what you are. Let me do a 2-minute summary of what we did today. Basically, we're talking about that there's always, in every situation, there's an outside story and there's an inside story. What happens on the outside happens to us. What's inside happens within us, in our own hearts and minds. We have no control over the outside. And if we want to know why we're feeling so stuck, it's because we are focusing too much attention on what's happening outside instead of what's happening inside, because inside we're empowered. Inside we could change. Inside Hashem has given us that capacity. Hakol b'yedei Shamayim chutz mi'yirah Shamayim. Everything is out of our control. Everything is only in the hands of Hashem, except our own personal yiras Shamayim, except our own personal hearts and minds, and where we are, and how we think, and how we process, and how we make meaning of everything that happens. That's in our control. So if you're ever feeling stuck and helpless, turn the spotlight of that lens, instead of focusing on what other people are doing wrong and the problems that are totally beyond your control. turn that spotlight inward to how you're feeling and ask yourself, what's going on? How am I feeling? What do I need? Or what's going on in my mind? How am I, what do I think about myself? What do I believe about myself in this moment? And then let go of the lies. Let go of the lies, because they are lies. And if you need support, come back to this group and ask your questions. If it's not working for you, it works. Yiddishkeit works. I want to tell you, and this system works. In the old, when we first started this, I did not have such confidence in the fact that, bitachon and connection with Hashem could really heal our lives. Because I knew that it worked for me, but I didn't see it work for anybody else. It was right at the beginning of these classes. I didn't see it work for anybody else. I knew in my own life that it worked for me, but I didn't see it happen. I didn't see that miracle happen for anybody else. So a lot of times people would say, you know what? I'm thinking about the fact that I have a neshama and it doesn't do anything for me. Or I'm thinking about the fact that I have a Yetzer Hara and it doesn't help me let go of the lies. And I'd be like, oh, okay, maybe this doesn't work for everybody, But over time, I've learned that, electricity works, right? If I walk into my bedroom and I flip on the light and the light doesn't turn on, there's no light shining in my room, even though I switched on the light, I don't call my therapist or my friend or my sister and say, hey, electricity doesn't work. You see, I turned on the light and nothing happened. Of course not, right? I know that electricity works. So if I turn on that light switch and the light doesn't go on, there's probably a loose wire, or maybe a fuse blew, or maybe it's just as simple as putting in a new bulb in the fixture, right? Something has to be repaired on my end. Electricity works. And it's the same thing here. If our thoughts about Hashem, if thinking about Hashem, as we talked about last week, think about Hashem's awesomeness. Think about your own awesomeness and your own unstoppable value, right? Act on it. Act on that respectability. Take action to display and demonstrate your connection and absorb the magnitude of what that means. If someone says, well, I'm thinking about it and it doesn't mean anything, you know what? There's a loose wire somewhere. Maybe Hashem was never the way someone said, maybe Hashem was never the good guy, Maybe Hashem was never the loving one in your life. And maybe that idea needs to be adjusted. Maybe there's something loose in that. Or maybe you're absorbing a lot of other information about yourself that you believe more than your value. And so that's why we also talked about listening to that voice, that cynic, that pushes back, that inner resistance. But let's remember this, that, believing in Hashem works. Bitachon works. Okay. Tamu uru ki tov Hashem, David HaMelech. We say this in Tehillim: taste and you will see that Hashem is good. We're not talking about the good of Olam Haba. We're talking about good, practical goodness that we could see and touch and feel. Taste and you will see that Hashem is good. So if we're not seeing that Hashem is good, we need to taste it. We need to taste it more. Maybe we need to taste it differently. So ask your questions. I am 100% convinced that this could really work for you with your questions, with your situation, with your personality, with whatever has happened in your life until now. You could really turn things around by absorbing the magnitude, the beauty of your awesome self. It's just a matter of discovering it. And that little example that she just shared of walking out in the morning and noticing that she was so upset about how the morning went, and just, forgiving herself and deciding that all that negative labels that was bombarding her heart at this moment, it was all a lie. It didn't belong to her. Making that decision and letting go, it was a fight that took, she said, an hour. But look, she was able to, walk into the day and have a beautiful day. That is what it's about. Little by little, inch by inch, peeling off another layer of the lies until our neshama shines brightly and we can access it more easily, more freely, and it could give us so much goodness in our lives. And once we know how to do that with ourselves, we can love more deeply in all our relationships. Once we know how to really love ourselves and appreciate the beauty of who we are, we just love the people in our, we love our children more, we love our husbands more, we love everybody more because we know how to love. It's a skill, like anything else. I don't have any magic words, I'll be honest, because I don't think there are any magic words. I think people have habits, and we all have habits that we are very attached to. And you can't convince me that my habit is not a good idea because I'm very attached to it. You're never going to convince me, right? The only thing you could do is I could give it up for love. I will not give it up for logic. I will give it up for love. Think about it, right? You can't convince yourself into, losing weight, not eating the junk, or, not yelling at your kids. You can't convince yourself into it. We're creatures of habit. This is how we behave. This is, it's really hard to change. We can't do it for logic. We could do it for love. And we could do a little bit for love, a little bit, So my suggestion would be to work on acceptance, that I cannot change this person. I'm going to accept him for who he is or who she is, if that's, the person. I'm going to embrace them. I'm going to love them. I'm going to every day find one thing that I really love about this person and notice it and absorb it. And, when another person, I'm assuming it's an adult, right? So let's say it's a husband or an adult child, okay? Our family members are smart. You're smart, right? I'm sure they're also smart, okay? They know, even without us saying anything, they know when we are, rejecting them in our minds, when we're judging them negatively in our minds. So I really think accepting this person, to know that they're really trying their best, and accept them and love them and embrace them and try to find something, a point of connection, and just relax in the relationship and love them. In a month, after doing that for a month, I think that, this could be revisited, then from a place, from a place of love, from a place of connection, when you're having fun in the relationship again, when there's love and when there's laughter and a little bit of loss of that tension and that negative judgment, it would take at least a month or maybe even two. From that place, you could say, honey, or whatever, it would really mean so much to me if I didn't have that, if I didn't have that flow of anxiety coming into our bedroom or coming into our kitchen or coming into our house. It would mean so much to me. Do you think you could, is there anything you could do for me about this? Or what can you do for me about this? From a place of real love, without judgment. I think that this person might really, be willing to do it from love. Do you think you could try that? Is that something you could try? Come back, let me know. Sterna@energizedliving.org. Sterna@energizedliving.org. Let me know how it goes for you. I'm curious, because then I could learn also. You know what I mean? And then we can work through it together. I don't want to just give you a piece of advice and walk away. I want to be able to walk through this with you together, because that's what this is about. We all need to walk into Geula together. We're sisters of different mothers, or the same mothers, right? We have the same mothers. We're sisters on this journey. And this group can also, there's so much wisdom in this group. Wow, thanks for sharing that. Okay, my dear friends, if you can come on, we have 5 more minutes. If anybody could come on and say, what are you taking away from today? What's something practical? What's an aha moment that you had, something that you realized, or something that you feel like you're going to go ahead and try in your house? If anybody has such an experience, such an aha moment or an insight or a thought to share, jump in. That's so beautiful. And I'm noticing that you're wearing a coat and a scarf. Winter in Australia, ladies. But it's amazing. It boggles my mind every time. I'm always amazed that at this very moment in time, the sun is shining brightly on one end of the world, and here it's black. It's night. And it just, I feel like that represents how we could experience time. We could experience this minute. Tonight is the yard site of 45 precious lives, and we could experience it in mourning. And there is an aspect of mourning, and at the same time, there's real mourning, not just an aspect of mourning. There is real mourning, but at the same time, it's Lag BaOmer, and it's a day of celebration. And so the sun is shining, and it's black, and we have to, navigate both. And thank you for bringing the light of Australia, the light of the sunshine into this room for all of us to share in light of your beautiful insight. Thank you, Batya. I want to conclude. In Australia, the day is almost over. Lag BaOmer is almost over, but here we're just getting started in New York. And we can end this day in Yerushalayim with Mashiach, together with the lives of those we lost, the 45 that we lost, Kedoshim that we lost last year, and every single one of our loved ones who completed their purpose here in this world. We can be reunited with all our loved ones together with Mashiach. May it be now, for real. Thank you so much for joining tonight. It was beautiful to spend time with you. A good Nacht, everybody.